Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 135. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Monday, Steelers Nation. Full disclosure, Dave and I recording this Sunday evening. I got some stuff going on Monday morning, so just made this best schedule-wise. So not sure when this will come out, but just a heads up, if any crazy breaking news occurs Monday morning, Dave and I will not be able to cover it. But Dave, how you doing? How was your weekend?
Happy Sunday. I've had a nice weekend. Got to watch the Pirates lose to the Phillies in grand style and waste a nice Paul Skeens performance and all. And watched the U.S. Open, the final round today, and got the Game 7 of Toronto and Florida on the tube as we speak in the first period, scoreless right now. So we won't have a lot to talk about today, but I think we've got enough things to keep us busy for probably at least an hour here to go over. And a bunch of you guys are going to the Pirates game on Monday night as well, too. So you ought to be able to spread out pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of seats. Parking should not be hard for this one. So yeah, some of the Steelers Depot crew, myself, Josh Carney, Scott Brown, Troy Montgomery will be there as well. Dave, I know you were scheduled to attend and had some stuff happen back home. So we're bummed, but we'll cheer you on and have a seat saved for you anyway, Dave.
Yeah, I'll be there in spirit and all. You guys take plenty of pictures, and maybe a few of those we'll post up on Twitter or whatnot of the four you guys hanging out together there.
All right, Dave, like you said, slow weekend overall, really no news, still on Aaron Rodgers' watch. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. Some stuff came out Friday from 93.7 The Fan. This was Adam Crowley that first suggested this, and the reporting is probably more has been made out of it than probably is actually there, but someone told him that's in the know that Pittsburgh had at least checked in on Saints wide receiver Chris Olave, their talented former first-round pick and a guy that has had some concussion injuries. The Saints are clearly in a rebuilding mode right now under new head coach Kellen Moore. Quarterback change with Carr retiring. They draft Tyler Shock. And so I guess the dots can be easy to connect in a sense of a team. Okay, maybe they're not going anywhere. Do they want to kind of totally bring this thing down to the studs and get some future assets and go from there? So there's been no real substantive reporting about Pittsburgh having serious interest or a deal is close. You can call about anybody. And so I just want to give all those kind of cautions and caveats that do not expect Olave to become a Steeler tomorrow or anytime soon or probably ever, but that is out there. And that's probably the biggest quote unquote news story of the last couple of days for the Steelers.
Yeah, that's kind of, I guess, the rumor du jour, if you will, wrapping up the weekend and all. And obviously, the sourcing on this doesn't appear to be real thick overall. In fact, I don't think any of the Saints beat writers are really talking about anything other than kind of saying that they don't think that such a deal for Olave would ultimately happen. I think one really downplayed the possibility of a trade, and probably because of an insanely high price for Olave when it comes to compensation. Regardless of being there, not being a lot going on Steeler wise, after the rookie minicamp last weekend there, I thought, okay, I'll look at this rumor and at least look at the plausibility to see how things would maybe line up as far as salary and the history of Olave and potential compensation and all the things that go into that. And it wasn't hard at all to pound out, I don't know, 1,200, 1,400 words, whatever it was on that. But I think when you start looking at, and once again, we don't know if this is just more of a rumor or, the Steelers could be kicking tires on several wide receivers at this point. Yeah, but when you look at it as a whole and starting with at least the salary financial aspect when it comes to Olave, the Saints did pick up his fifth-year option on his rookie contract for the 2026 season back in April. So that means technically he is under contract through 2026. The fifth-year option for 2026 for Chris Olave is almost 15.5 million. When you look at his base salary for 2025, it's almost 1.5 million, which is next to nothing, obviously. And he's due a little bit more than a $1.8 million roster bonus on the fifth day of training camp this summer as well, too. So tax tag title out the door for Chris Olave. If any team, including the Steelers, were to trade for him, would probably be a hair over $3.3 million. Now, the Saints would incur a dead money charge of almost $2.8 million to trade him away. So that you'd have to keep that in mind overall there. But I think just from from a cap and a cash standpoint, when it comes to could the Steelers obviously afford such a player in Olave, the short answer is easily yes. And them picking up that fifth-year option on him for 2026 makes that nearly $15.5 million fully guaranteed. The Steelers obviously wouldn't have any issues accommodating that either, and whether or not they would give him an extension, assuming any of this went down, would probably revolve around how he plays in 2025, and really the same goes for his career, or potential with the Saints for an extension next offseason should he not be traded. So the financials and all absolutely do work out if the Steelers were to go down that road and the Saints were interested in trading him. Now, the big thing when it comes to Olave is his health since entering the NFL. He is a very talented wide receiver. I think any All Pro or Pro Bowl. I mean, he's had a good season or two within there. Now, last season he had some more concussion issues and sustained what ended up being his fourth career NFL concussion back in November, and I think that came on the heels of him suffering another one earlier in the season, his third one. And I think you go back to his college career, he had a concussion, at least one game concussion or something at Ohio State there. So you're talking about a guy in short term here, especially in his three seasons in the NFL has had multiple concussions. And even though he was able to get back working on the side and practicing with the Saints late last season, it looked like he might end up seeing some time. He never made it back to the field overall for the Saints, and a lot of that might have been his doing. I think there's some quotes running around that he just wanted to get himself back over the concussion, and knew the Saints weren't going anywhere, and he was definitely looking forward to next year being 2025, and it was just trying to take it day at a time to get stronger, trying to develop every day to be able to come back even better. And he even was quoted by one of the Times Picayune writers, says, "I'll say this: if there's an opportunity to add a playmaker," oh no, that's Khan. I'm definitely looking forward to next year. I know this didn't go the way we wanted it to. Even when we were healthy, when everybody was playing, we could have been so much better just from the talent we had, the close losses we had. Talking about the Saints to Philly and Atlanta, it was tough. I'm definitely looking forward to next year and just trying to take it a day at a time to get stronger there. He also said he's a huge competitor. He sat out the rest of this year, meaning last season, just to be able to protect himself long term. He talked about, I've got a family. I want to be out there for a long time, just trying to protect myself. Playing football is something that brings me joy. I just want to go out there and compete and have fun. So obviously, if the Steelers were to trade for him, and regardless, I mean, his NFL career at this point is going to all stem around can he stay healthy and can he avoid these concussions moving forward here? So that is one big thing, and it could impact trade compensation for any team that was maybe trying to trade for Chris Olave. Now, there's another point to this I want to get to as well too, but I've talked a lot there. So based on the salary and the health and all like that, I think that catches everybody up on Olave.
Yeah, you summed it up well, Dave. Really talented guy, 1,000-yard receiver each of his first 2 years. Could have done it last year too, had it not been for the concussion. It's not like, okay, he had one concussion and missed a game. That happened, and then he got concussed again mid-season, and then was shut down, missed the back half of the year. In part because, like you referenced, the Saints season was over. There was really no reason to risk getting it back out on the field, but it was a serious concussion where he's missing multiple weeks, was on IR mid-year, and really impacted him. So I think it's 4 concussions throughout his career that he's had, and you have to really worry about that and factor that in any potential trade scenario. So maybe Pittsburgh checked in. It certainly does not hurt. I've been a fan of his game, like I said, out of Ohio State, but I always think about what's the incentive for the Saints to want to trade Chris Olave. They draft Tyler Shuck. It is a rebuilding team, but he's young. They just picked up the 5th-year option, so it's not like they declined it and they think that he's on the outs and that he's not in future plans. He very much appears to be. They're still confident in him, and so if Shuck does start, that's the most likely scenario based on that pretty weak depth chart in New Orleans right now at quarterback. You want to have Shuck to have no weapons at all to throw to. You eliminate Olave from the receiver room, it's really, really thin. So I just don't see the incentive there unless, Pittsburgh gave a too good to refuse type offer.
Yeah, and even that might not be enough. You look at their wide receiver crew minus Chris Olave, Brandon Cooks, who's obviously bounced around the league, a veteran, Rashid Shaheed, Cedric Wilson Jr., Bub Means, Kevin Austin Jr., Mason Tipton, Dante Pettis, Moochie Dixon, and Chris Tyree as they sit right now. Dixon and Tyree are both rookie undrafted free agents, by the way. So, when you look at let's just look at the top 2, Brandon Cooks and Rashid Shaheed. I mean, uh, that you got a guy in Tyler Shuck, and you're trying to look. It would be a clear sign that you're just you're punting on 2025, and really they might be anyway. But you're not giving you're not giving Shuck a lot of offensive weapons, and obviously one of the better offensive weapons in the NFL when healthy in Chris Olave. So right, it's not like they're going to get a lot of salary cap relief either from Olave. A little over $3 million is what he's set to earn. Where is the incentive to deal a guy like that unless he's hollering to get out of there, or you just get some sort of offer that's just too hard to turn down? And with the concussion history, once again, you'd have to think that's capped somewhere. I don't know, maybe a second rounder at best. It's hard to imagine the Saints getting a first rounder. I've kind of theorized that the Steelers probably wouldn't be willing to come off of a 4th rounder.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at highest a 4th rounder, maybe a 3rd rounder. And even so, let's say the Steelers were willing to pony up a 3rd rounder and, I don't know, swap a 5th and a 6th or whatever within that. Is that still worth it for the Saints to do that, especially when they have a guy like Olave under control for $15.5 million next season? It just, I think we're back to the Chewbacca defense here. It just does not make sense on the Saints end of things here.
Right, and Shaheed and Cooks, they're similar guys. They're both more one-note vertical players, talented. Shaheed's had to hit a lot of big plays, but you need a do-it-all type receiver for your young quarterback in this rebuilding offense, and Olave is that guy. So if I'm Pittsburgh, in general, putting Olave aside, to your point, I don't think Pittsburgh's going to have interest in trading anything more than a day 3 selection, a 4th-round pick for a receiver if a deal goes down anywhere across the league from now until the trade deadline after getting that 3rd for Pickens, which was good value overall. I don't think you want to give it right back, even though Olave would have extra team control through 2026 on that 5th-year option, just with his concussion history, the risk of the unknown, probably not worth it. So I think Pittsburgh, a 4th is the highest. And as you said, the Saints should have no reason and no incentive to take only a 4th-round pick for Chris Olave.
Now, if the Saints come out, let's say Olave stays put, and the Saints have to go with Tyler Shuck his rookie season, and you got a first-year head coach, and things don't go well, and you're sitting there at the trade deadline, and you're definitely out of it, and you're thinking about ways to maybe retool during the draft. Is it plausible that at come trade deadline that they might highly or might more consider moving on from a guy like Olave at that point, especially if Olave rebounds nicely, has a good season up until that point, doesn't have any concussion, issues or other health concerns. I would add some level to a probability to that happening. But once again, I think when you start looking at the Saints roster, you look at how much Olave's costing them this year. You look at them having control of him in 2026 through via the fifth-year option. It just does not make a lot of sense for them to move on from him this summer, unless Olave is the one spearheading this that says, "Get me out of here."
Mhm. I know we're spending a decent amount of time on something that probably won't happen and questionable legs to begin with, but it is a slow weekend. It is at least an interesting thought. Are there any other receivers we haven't talked about? We spent a lot of time on Alan Lazard with the Jets, the Packers, bunch of their receivers and Dubs and Watson and others. Are there any receivers in an Olave type situation worth talking about?
What's the deal with Slayton right now in New York with
Well,
the
they just
Giants?
re-signed him this
Yeah.
offseason, so I don't think he's gonna be a candidate.
Rolling through the teams here. I don't think there's anybody on Buffalo. I don't think Miami could Miami do anything with anybody. Let's see. They've got Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Malik Washington, uh, Nick Westbrook Akine. I don't smell anything happening there.
I mean, Hill,
Uh,
there's always been some rumors. Remember, he came out right after the season and said, "I want to be traded," and then
but do
walked
they want to
those
take
comments
on?
back.
I mean,
Sure,
you just got rid of a guy
yeah.
that uh, George Pickens. I would be shocked if the Steelers went after a guy like Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about any name from that depth chart that was even mentioned as a potential trade guy, but unlikely for a variety of reasons there. I know we talked about him last year. This is the part of the pick and trade where it just feels like deja vu. We have the same conversations this year as we did last year, but Alec Pierce with the Colts, if AD Mitchell has a really good summer, if he's able to prove himself, they have Pittman and Downs. There's going to be an odd man out there. Pierce is really a more vertical type of guy, but he's been effective downfield. I've always liked his game coming out of Cincinnati.
Yeah, I suppose that could be a lower, a less costly route there. What's going to happen with Adam Thielen over in Carolina this summer?
Well, they brought him back, but
Mhm.
I mean, there's some veteran value, but you have Robert Woods. Is there a real difference between Thielen and Robert Woods? I guess
Right.
would be my thought.
If you're going to trade for a receiver anyway with the Steelers, wouldn't you want somebody that's under contract past this year, if you could do it, and one a little bit on the younger side?
That'd be ideal, obviously, but it just depends on obviously if you're getting a guy on a rental last year of his deal, it's going to be cheaper to acquire that guy. So I think you keep a wider scope. I'm just spitballing names, just literally looking at the
Right.
hour lad step chart. Parker Washington with the Jags, they have Thomas and Diami Brown they signed, and of course they draft Travis Hunter. It's a new regime there. Washington had 30 something receptions last year. Traylon Burks in Tennessee, former
Ugh.
first round pick. I'm out on that idea, but I'm again we're scraping the bottom of the barrel here.
Yeah. Uh, to me, it goes back to kind of talking maybe about some of the, maybe one of those Green Bay wide receivers. If you're not talking about a guy like Lazard.
What the reporting is the Packers don't seem to be super interested in dealing those guys, and Watson is with the injury does have the injury he's coming off of, and probably won't be ready for Week 1, and they probably want to evaluate their young guys in Golden and Savion Williams before they even think about
Right.
moving somebody. But the Packers certainly have the most abundance of talent, and so that's been the most likely talking point. But just to bring up some different names there, I do think Burks will not be a Titan by Week 1. I mean, they signed Van Jefferson, they signed Lockett, they draft Aya Manor, they have Ridley, They draft DK as well. That's Chamari DK from Florida. I don't see Burks cracking that roster. So again, I'm not advocating for Burks in the least, but if there's a guy who might get flipped for a 7th round pick in the summer, it feels like he's as likely as anybody.
Yeah, I don't think that moves the needle with either one of
No,
us.
no.
I would imagine throughout the summer there's going to be continuing rumblings about Ayuk with San Francisco, but this is a guy that's still coming off that injury, probably not going to be able to practice until when?
I hadn't followed his rehab and timetable there, but I'm just going to assume he's not ready for the start of the season.
Right. So you're definitely not trading for him now, I would think, unless you could get him for a song and then you have to monitor his. It just that seems unlikely to happen at this point when it comes to the 49. I mean, it's hard to pull out legitimate guys that the Steelers might trade for at this point.
And so maybe they really truly will focus on the internal options. I've said they're going to at least go through the spring, through the 6 OTA practices, the 3 days of mandatory minicamp, and watch Roman Wilson and watch Calvin Austin and Robert Woods in the new system and see how things look, and at least do that before I think even making a phone call to anybody else or having any serious talks. Maybe there was a phone call on Olave, just checking in. I'm not sure, but again, this is just deja vu all over to last year's conversation of a whole off season of speculating about outside options and wondering about what Pittsburgh has internally. It's the same thing.
And as far as the free agents go, we've already kind of dusted over those. Keenan Allen's still out there. He's what, like 32, 33. What kind of salary would he command at this point? Amari Cooper, obviously, still out there. He's 31. You do kind of wonder how cheap a guy like that with the history he's had would sign for. Nelson Aguilar doesn't really move the needle for most folks. I would imagine doesn't move it much for you as well, too. I've always liked DJ Chark. I don't think he's under contract still at this point, but even so, not a huge needle mover. Tyler Boyd, isn't he still unsigned at this point?
He is. But does that also feel like Robert
No.
Woods all over again?
Yeah. I mean, I'm wanting somebody that I can probably get 2 seasons out of, I would think, that way. So yeah, it looks on. I know Omar says there's people out there, and yeah, technically there are, but I think the short list, at least when it comes to free agents, that could maybe give you something to make your roster actually better. I think that list would include Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, and the list kind of really stops there.
I'm okay with a 1 year play because that's all Pittsburgh may need if they go draft a receiver early next year. There's also Gabe Davis, but Pittsburgh has not shown really
Right.
any interest in him. He took visits with the Niners and the Giants. It would not be surprising if he reunited with Dable up there in New York.
Yeah, that's another one that we talked about coming off of his release from the Jaguars, and he's still probably got a little rehab. He's got he looks healthy enough that he's at least taking visits, but I think the teams are leaving it with more of a we'll see.
Right, which I wonder if that speaks to get a little healthier first, and then we'll maybe do a deal if he's got 2 visits and no contract.
Right,
Especially with Dable. Like, what else is there to
right,
find? You don't visit with that guy you know that guy, so it's really probably a medical thing, if anything.
right. So back to I guess kind of unless you got anything to add on the Olave
No.
thing. I would be pretty surprised if something. I mean, it's plausible from all aspects of the, like I said, from the financials and everything involved in it. The Steelers obviously could make it work. I just don't. I just don't see how the Saints really benefit from that unless it's they got very nice compensation.
Agreed. Again, if they had declined his 5th year option the way they did Penning, the tackle, okay, then maybe Olave becomes in play because they declined the option. They don't trust him. He's either not a fit or the health or there's something there where they say, we're going to wait and see. Maybe that's when you could really come in and swoop up Olave, but it's hard to see a team pick up the option and then trade that guy literally months later.
Well, I mean, you could look at it from a different standpoint too. They picked it up with it being a selling point of because you had a deadline to pick it up by, and he is now at least under contract at this point, and so you could view it as at least a selling point should they indeed want to trade him. That at least he comes to the new team with a 5th year option.
I get that, and that's a benefit, but they're not making the move at the time because of that
Right.
aspect. They're doing it because they believe in him and want him to be a Saint in 2026. That's a guaranteed fifth-year option. Now it's no longer the pick it up and you can rescind it later scot-free. I mean, you're picking it up because you want this guy to remain with your team.
Well, I mean, can can you rescind for a fifth-year option? I
Not
don't think you
anymore.
can.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm saying you used to be able to, and now it's fully guaranteed at time of being exercised.
Right, but they did it when they did it because the deadline's in early May.
Sure, but it had nothing to do with a selling point on a trade aspect. This was we want this guy to remain in New
Right.
Orleans, and we want him to be a Saint, and that's why they picked up the option.
Right. I see where you're coming. But it
Yeah,
would be a selling point if they
sure.
did go about trying to trade him.
It would increase their compensation for a guy that
Right.
would not be a potential one-year rental situation. Absolutely. We'll keep an eye on it, but don't expect anything big on that soon, if at all. And as you said, the Saints guys, I'm a big fan of Nick Underhill. He says he's not hearing any interest on the Saints' part. And if there was a deal for Olave, he said it'll be an insanely high price tag. I assume that means day two pick. And for Pittsburgh, they're probably out on something that extreme.
And the reason I only wrote about it and we're entertaining it now is because I did write about it and it just nothing else really going on at this point. And it at least gave us something to discuss.
Let's talk about one current Steeler. Ross McCorkle on Sunday wrote about his article entitled Calvin Austin isn't a star yet, but the Steelers should still extend him. And Ross has made this point a time or two before that, Pickens got all the attention as the last year of his contract, pending free agent after 2025. Calvin Austin, same draft class, same situation, a free agent after 2025, the breakout year in 2024. Should there be an appetite to do an extension with him, Dave? And if so, what would that look like?
I think, and first and foremost, the at least is it plausible that something could happen? I think the short answer on that would be yes. This team's going to be okay on cash and cap space, and it's not like a guy like Calvin Austin is going to break the bank here when it comes comes to a player for what he's done up until this point. You're talking about a guy that's only scheduled to earn $1.1 million in salary in 2025. If you just want to look at his what let's say over the cap's valuation is on him right now, it's almost $5.4 million. Let's, for the benefit of the doubt, say that his value is $7 million. All right. Could you still get something done with him? Absolutely, you could on a long-term deal, assuming he wanted to get something done. Now, here's the thing: when you talk about a guy like Calvin Austin III, he just started really to come into his own last year. You're talking about what's shaping up to probably not be a fantastic free agent wide receiver class next year. Unless they blow Calvin Austin's doors off, and even if you got a deal done with Calvin Austin in typical Steelers fashion, you're not going to guarantee money past the first year. You're probably going to at least want to do a 2-year extension on top of this year, which would lock Calvin Austin up through 2027. At that point, he's still got time on his side. He's coming into his own. Where is the incentive for a guy like Calvin Austin, especially if he's not going to get much more? I mean, he obviously would get more cash in 2025 by doing an extension, but he wouldn't be guaranteed money past 2025 more than likely. And let's cap his value at, let's say, around 7 million APY. Wouldn't he just be best suited to play out his final rookie season and then hopefully have a good enough season where he's up in his value and taking advantage of maybe a weak unrestricted free agent wide receiver class next offseason and then going that route?
You're right, and I think most players bet on themselves, but some guys want to take the sure thing, or what at least on paper is the sure thing right now, where he's knows what it's like to get hurt, miss this entire rookie year with an injury. If that happens again, it's going to completely tank the value that he has. And a lot of guys like at least the illusion of security, not going into the last year of my contract and where will I play next year, and trying to put down roots and map that stuff out. So I think there are reasons for Austin to take a deal now, but I think if you're Pittsburgh, You want to sit there and let it play out and see what he can do in another season, especially with this potentially new starting role opening up post Pickens trade. So I wonder if Pittsburgh wants to sit back and wait and see if Austin can do it again.
I agree with that. And would we both agree that there's no way at this point his value's $10 million?
I doubt it. I mean, I hadn't looked at the receiver list, and salaries have, of course, inflated here recently with the hot receiver market, but I 10 million certainly sounds like a big stretch.
I mean, this is a guy that right now has 53 career receptions for what, just over 700 yards and 5 touchdowns. I mean, I think we're giving him a huge benefit of a doubt, saying that his value might even be 7 million.
Who would he be comparable to in terms of somebody who just got a deal, a younger player, a little more based on projection than past productivity? Is there a name? Trying to scroll through the list of contracts. A Tutu Atwell got 10 million. Austin would probably, like you said, come in below that. I'm just trying to find some sort of comparable name to where Austin's sitting at.
Rashad Bateman got his average value right now is like almost 6.5. What has Rashad Bateman done in the league so far?
Is that his rookie deal though, or did he get an extension?
Didn't he sign with the team?
He may have. I truthfully do not remember.
He signed an extension with the Ravens. Yeah.
Okay. It was 2 years, just under 13 million.
And he's got more receptions, obviously. He's got like 90 and another 4. He's got like 130, 140 something receptions, and obviously probably about the double the yards. Now he did kind of come into his own a little bit last season, right? 45 receptions, 756 and 9 touchdowns for him. So that's probably not the best comparison. What about Kendrick Bourne? What has Kendrick Bourne done so far?
Well, he had an injury a couple of years ago and he's older, so it's a little hard for me to make that comparison.
It's hard to make a comparison with him. I'm just looking at values here, and Turpin just got a deal with the Cowboys, and he has
well, he's more returner. He's returner based.
He's got 44 career receptions. But even his deal is 4.5 million. So, 7 million. We're giving even at the $5 million mark that over the cap has on Calvin Austin, that might be stretching it a little bit at this point. The Steelers obviously probably are not going to pay that 7 million mark whatsoever. So once again, I think it comes down to, wouldn't it behoove Calvin Austin to play out his rookie season, see if he can increase his value and go that way. I mean, if he came to the Steelers and say, look, sign me up for 2 more years at $3 million per, they should jump on it, but I just don't think you'll see that.
Yeah, Austin should fire his agent if you go that route, because it's just the security is not worth it at that point for that meager value. But that's not going to happen. I know the point that you're making, though. What is the number one aspect of Austin's game you want to see from him in 2025?
I guess just more consistency overall with him. And look, one of the highlights that we had with him coming out of Memphis was what was it, like once every 4 or 5 times he touched the football was like an explosive play at Memphis. So I just want to see him continue to take the next step. But the thing is how many opportunities would he potentially get in this offense to have the targets and all? How many targets did he have last year overall? I mean, it was, look, without a doubt, it was a step forward for Calvin Austin last season. But all that said, 36 receptions, 548 yards, 4 touchdowns. I mean, I think from where we sit right now with this team, if he was able to hit 50 receptions for 700 yards and let's say 5 touchdowns, I think all of us should be over the moon if that happened.
Agreed. That would be a really good season for Calvin Austin, especially if Roman Wilson can chip in and put up some decent numbers too. I mean, Austin, in the couple of games that George Pickens missed in week 15 against the Eagles, week 16 against the Ravens, think Austin was the top receiver on the team. 5 receptions for 65 yards against Philadelphia, 4 for 65 against Baltimore. Had that one long catch down the right sideline. I thought his game did grow. I mean, there was playmaking. He had 10 receptions of 20 plus yards last year. That's one every 3.6 receptions. It's actually pretty in line with what you mentioned about what he did at Memphis.
College.
There was the big touchdown against the Chargers. There were some downfield plays. I want to see him make some more plays on the outside. The Ravens game, he did make one that I just mentioned, but a lot of his biggest plays were from the slot, and that's generally where he's been playing, and that made sense. And when you had Pickens and Metcalf, you thought that's where Austin was going to align. But Calvin Austin, if he's going to be a number 2 receiver and get paid, you got to make some more plays on the outside. He was an outside guy at Memphis. I don't want to say he can't, but I don't think he's shown that. The vertical tracking on the outside, there were some missed opportunities last year from that alignment. And it just felt like the majority of his plays were coming over the middle of the field, which is good because Pittsburgh needed more of that after having a desert, just a vacancy of those types of opportunities. But in terms of him personally, that next step, I do want to see that. I thought his catch radius got a whole lot better. That was my big critique of Calvin Austin. It was such a small catch radius where it felt like the first 2 years, in training camp, in game action his sophomore season, because he was hurt as rookie year, you had to throw it right between the 1 and the 9 for him to catch it. I thought his catch radius expanded. He made some tougher grabs outside his frame. That was encouraging, but I want to see him win more on the outside, and now he'll have a great chance to do so with Pickens out the door.
Does he feel like a guy, though, that'll ever be a really bona fide number 2, not only in Pittsburgh, but anywhere else?
That's not my read. I felt he was a good number 3. That would be his best fit. And so I'm happy to be proven wrong. And he showed more than what I thought he would last year, which was positive and encouraging. But my view of him is probably ceiling number 3 type receiver.
I agree with you on that. And you don't knock yourselves out trying to extend those players if you're the Steelers.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I do get Ross's point. We should also mention Austin, a pretty effective punt returner, and I assume he'll be handling those duties. Had the punt return touchdown against the Giants last year, Pittsburgh's first since 2019. So additional value. Will he do some kicks too? I wrote an article Sunday. Who'll be Pittsburgh's kick returners? I assume Gainwell will get some burn back there. Not sure who the other guy will be.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he does get that. Obviously, can increase his value moving forward. The more he does, and the more success that he has in that area. Look, I think the world of Calvin Austin. I think he's a great interview. I think he's a guy. I think both of us have said that in the past. Anytime that there's a Calvin Austin interview that comes up, we're both scrambling to try to find it because he's an entertaining guy, says all the right things. I think he's a great locker room guy, everything that goes along with that there. But just, from the player aspect, it was good to see him take the next step in his development last year, especially after missing the time last year or in his rookie season and all. He's been able to bounce back from that, but I think he is kind of what he is at this point. Once again, I think we should be over the moon if he hits like the 50 receptions, 700 yards, 5 touchdowns. I think that's absolutely fantastic, but I just don't think that you knock yourself out this summer if you're the Steelers to try to get a job done, unless he comes to you and says, sign me up for $3 million per over the next 2 years. No guaranteed money. And he would be absolutely off his rocker to accept such a deal within that. So I understand why Ross penned the article, especially this time of year, especially on the heels of George Pickens being traded away, especially on the fact that who else is this team potentially going to extend, and where they're going to spend their cash this offseason, even after a supposed Aaron Rodgers signing? We've talked about TJ Watt's probably going to be first on that list. We've entertained the notion of a Deshaun Elliott. I would think that the Steelers would be knocking themselves out to more in an attempt to sign Deshaun Elliott to an extension, a lot more so than they would a guy like Calvin Austin there. So once again, I understand Ross, writing around that. I would be shocked if it happened for multiple reasons that we just gave when it came to Calvin Austin III.
Agreed. I'll say final thoughts. I'll say one positive thing in his favor and one thing I still want to see more from him. I thought Arthur Smith knew how to use Calvin Austin last year, even though the numbers weren't prolific, and when Pickens went down, the passing game really tanked. But not that it needs any more litigation, but Matt Canada had no idea what he was doing. Right. Calvin Austin had that big touchdown against the Raiders in 2023. Never hear from him again until the final minutes of the Buffalo game where he catches, I think, that last touchdown in the wild card loss. In Austin, it was more focused, it was more centered. Maybe Austin's development and, getting another full season in maybe helped him as well in terms of, his personal growth and progression. But Smith had a better idea how to use him as that vertical threat. The thing with Austin, though, was, you think he'd be more of that joystick player that could win in space on RPOs and make some guys miss, and it's really not his game. He's not a great yak guy in that sense of throw the swing screen to him or the tunnel and let him make a play. He's a little more build-up runner, use that speed down the field to make those vertical throws down the seam, over the middle. That's kind of his game, and so that's all I've always been wanting a bit more from Austin. He goes down really easily on contact. He doesn't make a lot of guys miss in space. He'll run past you, no question about that. That speed is legit, but the wiggle, the agility, it's never really been there for him like you think it would be for a smaller guy.
I think Pro Football Reference has him down as one career broken tackle, and that came last year. Now, he does have an average depth of target, which is nice, of 12.5, but a couple of the receptions that he's had have been, obviously way down the field, which helps kind of offset that off a little bit. His yards after the catch per reception isn't awful at 4.2 for his career, but once again, we're talking about a guy that has just 53 career receptions. I think the bonus with Calvin Austin in your offense is a lot of the things we talked about once again with him coming out of college. The fact that if you do get him the ball in open space and enough times, as we mentioned, once out of every 4 or 5 times going to produce an explosive play. And he did have his share of those last year, which was good to see. And the Steelers are going to need some of those in 2025 as well, even though he's probably still going to have limited targets, limited production overall when it comes to that. So once again, I think, how you use them, you need to be judicious in that. Make sure you use them correctly. And it seems like Arthur Smith has a pretty good handle on it. I just don't think this is a guy that's going to, once again, I think if he hits 50 receptions, probably something's happened. Somebody's probably been injured or something like that. Not unachievable by any stretch of the imagination, but it does feel like 50 receptions would be his ceiling.
Let's end on this. Let's say he does that. Let's say he has a 50 catch, 700-yard, 5 touchdown season as you outlined. What happens to him after 2025? What's his market value? Does he get re-signed?
I think, obviously, if you're able to do that, you got, let's say a quarter of those catches are explosive plays, there will be a team out there willing to sign him. I still doubt it would be in the $7, $8, $9, $10 million range, but the cap's going up and values of players are going up and those kind of things there. I don't think he would get that kind of money from the Steelers regardless, but I think he could. I'll just leave it at this. I think he could help his value in 2025.
I mean, Tutu Atwell, when did he sign his deal? I'm trying to think about if that was this offseason or last. I think it was this offseason he signed that 1-year, $10 million contract.
But isn't that full of incentives though too?
I'm not sure on the incentives. It says the contract is fully guaranteed, so I assume no incentives, and includes a $5 million signing bonus. That's from over the cap.
Looks like $5 million guaranteed. He's getting $5 million of it's guaranteed. The cap number's $10 million. So he got $10 million. I thought he was one that had incentives.
Over the cap showing $5 million guaranteed salary. Says it's fully guaranteed.
I might be thinking somebody else then.
You might. Because last year, Atwell had 42 catches for 562 yards and no touchdowns. I mean, that's pretty comparable to what Austin did.
Okay.
I think if he had the season...
Trying to find more specifics on that. I might be having him confused with somebody else.
If Austin has that 705 season, I think he's definitely getting $7-8 million from at least somebody. Pittsburgh, I don't know if they would do it or not. They might, but I think with, like you said, the cap going up, Atwell getting $10 million, I think Austin would get at least 8.
Okay, it's plausible. I think it's plausible.
But I think to your point, you just want to see him do it again in this opportunity, and so that's where I'm at. I don't think Ross is necessarily wrong to suggest it, and it's a different thought, and I'll take anything that's not entertaining this free agent receiver conversation or trade discussion. But yeah, I just want to see Austin do it again.
All right.
I don't want to spend much time at all really on this day, but it was one of the stories of the weekend. Antonio Brown in the news, and I'm still fuzzy on all the details. I was about to go to bed. It was 2 a.m. and I'm seeing it on Twitter, Antonio Brown trending, and trying to figure out what happened. And I still don't really know exactly what occurred. That's not a great way to lead this story, but there was some incident in Miami. He was down there for a boxing tournament as a guest, and there was gunfire. He was detained, not arrested. He was let go. He says he's not been arrested. I think the police are still trying to figure things out, but Antonio Brown in the news for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, somebody said they were trying to jump him for his chain or something. I don't know. There's a couple of videos out
Hmm.
there, and it was enough that I think ESPN had either an AP Wire report about it or something. But imagine that all these years later, Antonio Brown still in the news.
What do you think his legacy is going to be when all is said and done 10, 20, 30 years from now?
Unfortunately, probably out of money and a lot of man. Imagine what that guy could have done. A few more years in the league had he kept his head on straight.
I guess my
Because
question is how
without a
much
doubt, those 5 or 6 years that he had, that he strung together in Pittsburgh were just unreal.
he was the best receiver in football, no debate for that stretch. But how much of his career in life, I should say, will be remembered by football, and how much of it will be remembered by everything else?
Uh, the further you get away from the everything else, some of that seems to slide off into the background because there's usually somebody else that's going through everything else.
True, but AB keeps having it as
Yeah,
something else pop up every. And I don't. Maybe he's totally innocent here, but there's always some other non-football thing coming up with AB.
I just think he would be in his best interest to lay low for numerous years, but I don't think that's in his DNA to do that.
Hmm.
Uh, I do wonder what all this has potentially done to, his Hall of Fame, aspirations and all. But I mean, if you're looking at just his play on the field, once again, I mean, those 5, 6 years that he had were just unreal. And yeah, unfortunately, what happened after that, he really didn't do much. I mean, he does have a Super Bowl championship, right?
With Tampa Bay, he won
Right,
that late, yes. But just to make that point, what he'll be remembered for in Tampa Bay is not winning a ring. It's
right,
for running off the field mid-game, taking off all of his clothes,
right.
and deuces, peace out. I'm leaving the stadium. So AB will be eligible for the Hall of Fame come 2027. Other players eligible first time that year, not including previous classes that'll be on future ballots. Adrian Peterson, Richard Sherman, Rob Gronkowski, Le'Veon Bell, Andrew Whitworth, Cam Newton, Gerald McCoy, and of course Ben Roethlisberger. Who do you think are the 3 or 4 names most likely to make Canton of that list?
Oh, wow. Gronk's gonna get in.
Yeah, AP is
Uh,
going to get in.
you'd like to think, Ben Roethlisberger would be a first ballot.
Agreed.
Uh,
Peter,
Whitworth, isn't
you think
Andrew
Peterson?
Whitworth?
Yeah,
Uh,
Whitworth is also on the ballot. Yep.
I mean, Peterson, yeah. I mean,
I don't think AB gets in first year.
yeah, I
I'm
don't
pretty confident saying he's not getting in first year.
yeah, especially if he didn't have all the other stuff that goes along with it,
Oh,
you'd
sure.
give him more of a chance, but I don't think he's gonna be a first ballot guy, no.
We didn't have the other stuff. He'd be first ballot all day because his career would have been longer. And even if it hadn't been, just the accolades alone would have screamed first ballot. He was the best
Right.
receiver in football for 4 or 5 years. But I think just on principle, even from the Hall of Fame, they did this with T.O. They tweaked him for a year to not get him in. And I mean, I think with AB, he's got a lot more going on than T.O. ever did.
Mhm.
And so first ballot, no way, especially with those heavy hitters of AP, Gronkowski, Ben, and then potentially Sherman, Whitworth, etc. Not to mention whoever else will still be on the ballot from previous classes. So, maybe down the road AB gets in, but I know that the focus is supposed to be on really the career. But I wonder if Hall of Fame voters are going to sit there and go, are we going to give this guy a Hall of Fame speech, Antonio Brown? Can? Are we going to let him do that? And I wonder if some are going to shy away because of that.
And here's the thing too, you've still got that log jam at the wide receiver position that's not gonna probably
Hmm.
diminish that much, and then now aren't they shying away from there being at least mandatory 5 guys from a current class going in
Right.
and
They
being
just they
being
just
more
changed the rules.
selective?
Yeah, forget all the rule changes. We talked about them at the time on this past class, but it is a more selective class. And then I think if you're a Hall of Fame voter, you sit there and say, are we going to vote this guy in? And then 2 years later, something else is going to happen.
Right.
And, We have to decide, does he stay in, and is it kind of tarnished anytime you see his bust because this whatever future off the field things occurs. So yeah, I don't think AB's going to get in for a long time, if at all. What you say?
Right. Right. I agree.
All right, Dave. Aaron Rodgers' watch continues. There was his biographer, somebody who wrote a book on Aaron Rodgers, that believes a decision is coming soon. And I do get the sense, I know it's been talked about literally for 2 months of somebody saying the decision's coming soon, and then it doesn't. But I do feel like we're getting closer to the end of this saga and Rodgers eventually signing with Pittsburgh.
Well, every day that comes off the calendar, we're getting closer to something.
That is technically true.
At this point, I'm just ready to be over it. At this point, does his biographer really know? It just sounds like Aaron keeps such a tight circle, and he's probably laughing. There's been enough that's happened since the last time on the Pat McAfee show. He's probably ready to come back out again and cover all the BS that's out there about him. I just find it hard to imagine that a biographer knows how close he is to making a decision or not.
Yeah, I think we're all still taking some guesses, but I I mean, you have OTAs coming up, you have minicamp coming up. Can you really expect that should you really expect Pittsburgh to wait and be content with Rodgers giving no further information through mandatory minicamp in 3 weeks from now?
I mean, what's going on behind doors that we don't know about? Is he stringing them along in the aspect that I really don't know whether or not I want to play or not? Is he look? I'm good to go except for I got to get all this personal stuff behind. There's just so much stuff behind the scenes that we don't know. I mean, at some point, where are the Steelers going to turn to right now anyway? Like we had mentioned
I
in
know.
the previous show, is you got at least you got some bodies in there to work with in the meantime, and it's not like there's a tons of possibilities out there to go with otherwise, unless you were serious about going after a guy like Kirk Cousins. But even that could potentially wait up until this point as well too. So I know Art Rooney said we're not going to wait forever and that kind of thing there, but I mean, what alternatives do you have at this point?
I agree, and that's why Pittsburgh is being so patient because he is the only true clear-cut starter, full-time starter left available. But should that be your guiding light of your franchise? Well, we have no other choice, and so we're just going to have to wait for Aaron. And does that mean if July rolls around and this team's going to training camp and Aaron still hasn't made a decision, do you still wait for him then? I mean, you have to set a deadline at some point. Maybe not OTAs, maybe not minicamp, although that's my personal deadline. But the team has to draw the line in the sand at some point, don't they?
Yeah, I would think by training camp, obviously, because I mean, at that point, I mean, you're really starting to put in your offense and getting the timing down and all with the guys, and yeah, you're starting to get your direction of the season. I don't think it's fair to to everybody else on the roster, especially your veterans, as well too. If you don't have any kind of clear, concise way that you're going there, so I mean, I think the drop down date, if you would be the start of training camp. Because once again, what was this guy going to sit out the Latrobe part of training camp just because he don't want to go to Latrobe? How fair? That's going to send the wrong. No matter when he does sign, assuming he does, it's still going to look like the Steelers fumbled this throughout the process.
But to your point about, I understand your point about the message being sent if he wasn't there for training camp and wasn't putting in the work, but doesn't the same apply for the spring work? Most of the veterans will be there. They'll all be there for the 3-day mandatory mini camp.
Yeah, I think just because of sheer fact you're giving him the benefit of the doubt because of his age and his experience and all like that. And once again, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
Sure. Sure.
What kind of maybe personal stuff he is having to try to put to bed at this point. I'm just saying you ask kind of what the drop dead date is. I would think it's the start of training camp.
I think it probably is for Pittsburgh, but I just would make the personal argument that it should be earlier than that. It should be OTAs. It should be mandatory minicamp because it's 9 days of practice. These aren't 2-a-days. These are a couple hour practices and then you're done. So you can handle any personal stuff still, on the phone, on the internet. I mean,
Right.
you
I don't like it. I'm just telling you
Mhm.
that what you asked what I think of the
Sure.
drop dead date should be. And if it was up to me, he'd already be in there by now, and he'd definitely be in there by the start of OTAs.
Right, right. So
Especially with the turnover that you had, young offensive line, new running back in a rookie, new wide receiver in DK. I mean, you just got it's not like you got a extremely veteran unit that's going to be with Aaron Rodgers in there, and that means you need a little more time. It'd be one thing if you got like 6 or 7 veteran guys in, including, the offensive line and all, but you just don't have that.
yeah, they need a leader. They don't have a leader, and Rodgers is supposed to be that guy, and you
I
can't
mean,
be at home and be
who's
the
your
leader.
leader on the offense right now? Pat Fryermuth?
I guess. I mean, Mason, I think would still be. I mean, obviously he'll be a captain if Rodgers does not end up becoming a Steeler. But I think there's enough veteran experience for Rudolph that I think he can lead the huddle.
Yeah, but right now he's hovering with the cloud over him that
Sure.
probably doesn't want to do too much anyway because this might be Aaron Rodgers' team.
Well, I mean, I think he'll lead fine, even if Rodgers isn't there. He'll assume that mantle. But it's not fair to Rodgers to not know, or to Rudolph, I should say, to not
Sure.
know his situation, and to the other guys. And if you go to OTAs and Rodgers isn't there, the only questions are going to be asked are: Is Aaron coming? Do you want Aaron to come? Every question to Mason will be about Aaron, and it's not fair to those guys. They're putting in the work. They're there. They're having to face the music, answer these questions while Aaron's sitting in California. I believe he's got personal stuff. I want to give him some grace and time, but it's May 27th. If you want to be the leader of this team, you got to show up. And that means doing some stuff. Maybe you don't want to do some things that might be annoying to a veteran. You can't just come in. You can't be the leader of this team, the franchise quarterback, and show up when you want to show up, especially, even as much crap as Russ got, and some of that was justified. Like Russ put in the work. Like he was a professional. He showed up to every event. He was liked in that sense. There was no, I'm going to skip this. I'm not going to do that. He wanted to do everything and be involved. And Fields was the same way. And then to go to Rodgers, where, I'll show up when I want to. Just it's not the right start for what is a 1 year play. Like you got to hit the ground running if you're Pittsburgh with Rodgers if he does sign. This is not we'll give it a year and maybe hope this is not a year 2 plan. This is a 1 year plan. You better start fast, especially with the schedule, the tough end of the season, all that kind of stuff. So all this is for me to say just that I think a decision is going to come soon, and I think it needs to come soon.
I hope it does, just so we can move past the discussions of when do we think it's going to happen.
And then move to the discussions of what does it look like with
Right.
Rodgers, a Steeler or not a Steeler, and that endless saga there.
Right.
But at least it moves the ball forward, and there is finality in terms of who this team's quarterback will be in 2025.
Agreed.
All right, David kind of wraps up most of everything. Should note, we mentioned this on a previous podcast. No live stream Monday because we're going to the Pirates game. I think we're just going to have to skip this week. I don't have really any other availability later this week. So just keep abreast of that. I'll have probably something on the YouTube channel announcing our next live stream. Probably will just be 2 weeks from Monday and kind of sticking with our regular schedule. Dave, one last thing I want to go through article I have written for Monday morning on the Steelers' best additions of the offseason. So that could be trades, could be free agent signings, and draft picks. There were a lot of them. It was a pretty busy offseason for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Putting Rodgers aside with that still unknown, give me like the top 2 or 3 best additions Pittsburgh made to the roster in terms of guys who could potentially impact this team in 2025.
I don't think. Yeah, I mean, you have to start with DK Metcalf. I think.
Yeah, 100%.
You just absolutely have to start with DK Metcalf because of, especially on the heels of trading away Plaxico Burress. I don't know how you build this list without DK Metcalf at the top. Let's see, impactful pass there.
I can read off all the names if you want a refresher on all the new additions this year, and this is just in no order. And I'm not including the undrafted free agents, but Derek Harmon, Darius Slay, Malik Harrison, Mason Rudolph, Kenneth Gainwell, Brandon Eccles, Daniel Aquale, Juan Thornhill, Asezi Otomewa, Leisha Smith, Caleb Johnson, Jack Sawyer, Y.A. Black, Will Howard, Carson Bruner, Dante Kent, and Robert Woods.
Okay, I would think Darius Slay would probably have to be up there number 2 or number 3 behind DK Metcalf because it gives you an experienced guy, a guy that can help help Joey Porter Jr. learn a little bit, a guy that should be a little bit more reliable than what they've had out there opposite on the other side here the last couple of seasons there. I know it's only a 1-year deal, but to have a guy like that in the locker room, I think it can be impactful. So I'd probably put him number 2. I'm not going to put I'm on none of my list. I'm not going to have guys like Gainwell or Eccles or Aquale or Thornhill or Malik Harrison because I just don't view those guys other than just spot kind of players. In fact, you kind of hoping that those guys don't have to see a lot of playing time overall. Some of those guys might not even make the roster if you want to come down to it there. How about Caleb Johnson being an impactful ad? I mean, I think this is a guy that, as I've said since he was drafted, I think sooner rather than later, this is going to be your first and second down back. And I think he fits in good with the system and everything that goes along with that. And you obviously have Jaylen Warren. You know what Jaylen Warren can bring, but I think there's going to be an opportunity for Caleb Johnson to have to make a statement, to have an impact on this offense in his rookie season. So I would probably put him number 3, to be honest with you.
Okay, so you would go Metcalf, Slay, Johnson?
Yeah, I think I would.
Okay, that's solid. I went Metcalf. I went Harmon second, still for those defensive snaps that they need, that youth, that physicality. Then I went Slay. Then I went Caleb Johnson. And then I put Mason Rudolph fifth. Even if Aaron Rodgers signs, you have to have that trusty number 2 backup, somebody who comes in off the bench mid-game if there's an injury, whatever the case is, or have to spot start. I know Rodgers has been largely durable throughout his career, but he's 41 going on 42 towards Achilles 2 years ago, played hurt in 2024. So I think coaches sleep a lot better with Mason Rudolph as that backup quarterback who can come in and at least run your offense exactly how you want it to be run.
I just wonder how impactful Harmon can be out of shoot. He's obviously going to play.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder between him and Caleb Johnson over a full season, who will, not saying that Harmon won't progress into, a super impactful player on defense, especially, as you move past the Cameron Hayward and all like that. I just wonder how impactful he'll have versus Caleb Johnson, and especially kind of out of the chute.
Sure, that's fair. I think Johnson could play more snaps than Harmon. Slay, I think, certainly will play more snaps than Harmon, but the weight of those snaps and the need of those snaps is where I give Harmon the edge overall. So, yeah, do you think, okay, let me put it this way. Who plays more snaps on their respective side of the ball as a rookie, Derek Harmon or Caleb Johnson?
I think I'm willing to bet Caleb Johnson ends up out snapping him, barring injuries, obviously.
Sure.
And look, I mean, you get into who's going to win the Joe Green Rookie Performer of the Year annual award. If you were to bet right now, my money would be on Caleb Johnson.
I think so too, just because the rushing numbers are a little bit easier to look at, a little bit gaudier. And so, and as you said, there's a chance for Johnson to make maybe more an immediate impact than Harmon in terms of snap opportunity. But I do think the weight of those snaps, I'll give the edge to Harmon. But I think it's half of one. It's a 6. What's the saying, Dave? Half of one,
half
6 of one, half
dozen,
dozen of the other.
Yeah, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
I got there. So I think it's, negligible which side you want to argue here. But yeah, I think that's fair overall. So our lists are pretty similar. Who would you put in that 5th spot if you went? Would you put Harmon 4 if you went Metcalf, Slay, Johnson?
I probably would. I'd go Harmon 4th and then Mason 5th.
Okay. I was trying to think that. I mean, that 5th spot, there is some debate there. Could Malik Harrison is going to give you a bunch of special team snaps. Gainwell hopefully will give an impact play or two and some kick returns. What will Brandon Eccles' role be? Could there be a slot role for him? And then maybe a Jack Sawyer. He's gonna play some, at least defensively, special teams. So that 5th spot, I think you can kick that around a little bit.
Well, I mean, I'm a fan. I think Sawyer's underrated coming out as part of this Steelers draft class and all. But I think ideally, if things go right, his snaps will be limited, and he'll be more of a special teamer and a guy that helps fill in some snaps when T.J. Watt is off the field, which we hope isn't a lot, but probably needs to be some just to kind of preserve him overall. So, yeah, I mean, if Harmon has, I mean, if Sawyer has to play a lot of snaps, something's probably happened to somebody, and which obviously last year they had banged up outside linebackers, so
Yeah.
they probably could have used a guy like Sawyer last year.
That's why they traded for Preston Smith at the deadline. All right, Dave, that's a good conversation there. We'll see the input from the readers. My last thing, this article will come out Tuesday. Will Howard, obviously, at best in an ideal world for Pittsburgh, number 3 quarterback to open up the year, where it's presumably Rodgers or some other veteran and Rudolph topping the depth chart. But could Howard still play this year? Could he still start this year? I have a study that's gone through how many quarterbacks have started around the league each year since the NFL moved to their 17-game schedule in 2021. And on average, about 64 quarterbacks start per season. And Pittsburgh started multiple quarterbacks each year since then, including 3 in 2023. And so, obviously, if Howard has to start or play, as you like to say, something has gone wrong, but you can't discount it. And I went a little bit further in the study. In every single year, each of the last 4 seasons, at least one quarter of the NFL has started at least 3 quarterbacks in 1 year. And in 2022, 15 teams started 3 quarterbacks that year. That's almost half the league. And so you never know what could happen. There's always some team that gets completely snake bitten by injuries or whatever the case is. You hope it's not Pittsburgh, but history says about a quarter of the league, 8 teams, will start at least 3 quarterbacks this year, which means you can't discount the chance of Howard playing this year.
Yeah, I mean, you make a good point. Obviously, the health of that position is going to, and the performance of the team, going to heavily determine that. Aaron Rodgers obviously is up there in age, and when Mason Rudolph has played, it's been kind of hit and miss at times. So if you did get later on in the season, you did lose your starter and for an extended amount of games, and let's say Mason Rudolph comes in there and gets banged up, lo and behold, you could be in a situation where you almost have to start a guy like Will Howard. But I can't help but think, as we mentioned numerous times over the years, 2004 when this team drafted Ben Roethlisberger, the original plan was for him to be the number 3 quarterback for the whole season and not take any snaps. And you get into the offseason, Charlie Batch had the knee issue, and that Roethlisberger obviously made enough steps in his progression to pass the great Brian St. Pierre up at that time, and which you would obviously hope would be the case in that. And then you got 2 games into the season, you lost Tommy Maddox, and boom, your first round draft picks in there starting after the initial thought was we're just going to have him sit and learn for the whole season. So anything can happen when it comes in. We have seen the Steelers back when obviously when what was it, the Duck season with Roethlisberger and his elbow, and Mason
2023.
Mason fell flat. No, it was before that. With,
you're saying 2019, but I'm saying they also started 3 quarterbacks in 23. They started 3 in 2019, so it's happened a lot to Pittsburgh recently.
Right. So if he takes any snaps at all, something's happened. That's we will have multiple posts on to get to that point,
Right. But the point is something could happen. Something's going to happen to some team this year where they're starting people they didn't expect to start. And what's the old saying? Man plans, God laughs, and the football gods could laugh at some team this year. Hopefully not Pittsburgh, but you never know. And even if it doesn't get to Howard starting, if somebody goes down, Rodgers goes down a game, then Howard's your number 2, and he's 1 snap away. And you never know, guy gets in the concussion protocol. That happened to Fields last year against Dallas, where Kyle Allen had to come in and play 2 snaps and rip the pass to Freiermuth down the seam. So you just never know. You're 1 snap away from being 1 snap away.
Look, I mean, Brock Purdy's a perfect example of you never know. Because we probably, if it weren't for injuries and all, we probably might not even know Brock Purdy's name at this point. Now he's $50-something million per year richer.
Yep. $53 million per year. So funny how it all works out. So just an interesting off-season study there. All right, Dave, any other final thoughts, any breaking news? If not, we can get to some read emails and close out today's show.
All right, I got them queued up here. Ryan Jones says, this is Ryan from Chicago. First off, just wanted to say you guys do a fantastic job breaking down all the latest Steelers news. Always something I look forward to during the bye week or work week. Big shout out to his dad. He says, Brad, for putting him on the show. He says, I'm a big believer in Will Howard, but with all the buzz about next year's quarterback class, the fact that the Steelers currently have 12 draft picks and the draft being held in Pittsburgh, he says, I can't help but wonder, could the Steelers be stockpiling picks to make a trade for the next franchise quarterback? Ryan, yeah, we've kind of hit on this throughout this offseason. Got several emails on it. We'll continue to get several emails on it. You're not off your rocker at all to be wondering, could the Steelers be, do something to trade up next draft in Pittsburgh for their franchise quarterback? And just to kind of parlay off of that, I think Ross McCorkle has an article up on the site on this Sunday about just to kind of look at the potential teams that could be in play for a quarterback and the type of draft capital that they had. So sort of a look out. Here's the best suggestion I can give to anybody who's quarterback hungry, the Steelers early in the first round of the 2026 draft. Get YouTube TV, set it to record the games of all these top quarterbacks, LSU, Texas, who else? UCLA, and do your best to try to at least keep up and know the names and at least know the highlights of some of these guys. So, yeah, as we get further into the season, and as we've said multiple times, what the top of the draft quarterback class might look like right now might change, and we don't even know if the Manning kid's coming out or not. And could there be somebody that people aren't talking about that is maybe like a 5th, 6th round guy that just has a phenomenal season and boost himself up into the talk? You never know with this, but it is not unreasonable to be wondering, could the Steelers be in play for a franchise quarterback in the first round of the 2026 draft?
A reasonable and likely thought. Whether or not they get one, we can't say, but they're going to be in the mix. They're going to be looking for one of those quarterbacks next year, and at a lot of those pro days, I'm sure. And that was the reader's dad that turned him onto the show.
Yeah, his dad, Brad, turned him onto the show.
Thank you, Brad. We appreciate the assist there, and thank everyone for listening. But yeah, Pittsburgh certainly will be in the quarterback market, barring something unforeseen in 2026.
All right, I won't spend a lot of time on this one. Jason Chadwell, Calvin Austin, the third extension. Just read the article by Ross McCorkle on the site about Calvin Austin being a good extension candidate. I was surprised with how many people disagreed in the comments. He said, although Calvin Austin will never be more than a solid number 3 in any offense, he says, I do see value in signing him to a 2-year extension. He wouldn't cost that much at all. Isn't there something to be said about not turning over a wide receiver room? He says Austin is a good teammate and not a diva. So there's that aspect. Jason, we're not going to spend a lot of time on it because we had a whole segment in the show about it. But I think you see where we come down on the whole. And look, it takes 2 to tango as well too. So Calvin Austin's got to be willing to sign for X amount of money. My heart, I understand why. Once again, Ross wrote about it, and I think he framed it okay. I will just be surprised if something comes of this.
Yeah, just go back to our earlier comments. I do understand the merit and the validity of the discussion. I'm just not there.
One last one from Elijah Fisher. He says, I'm a longtime Steelers fan, collector, and terrible podcast listener for several years here. This question is for both of you, but I know that Alex has a knack for the Steelers pre-1970 throwbacks. As a Steelers autograph collector, one way I've been trying to represent the pre-merger Steelers is by collecting autographs from each player from the Steelers Legends team announced by the team in 2007. The team includes 24 players, 11 offense, 11 defense, and 2 special teams. He says, my question is, if it were up to you and you could expand this team to the 1960s standard 40 players by adding 8 offensive and 8 defensive players, which players would you add? He says, I'm only 28, but I enjoyed nerding out about this as much as Alex does. Any input would be appreciated. It's easy to collect autographs from modern players, but I also want to be appropriately representing the lovable pre-merger team. So I guess he says from the 2007 Legends team, Let's see. He's got a link to that. Thanks for sending that. Bobby Lane, Dick Hope, John Henry Johnson, Roy Jefferson, Ray Matthews, L.B. Nickel, Chuck Churanadolo was a center, Mike Sandusky, Bruce Van Dyke, Charlie Bradshaw, Frank Barachone, defense, Eugene Lipscomb, Ernie Stautner, Ben McGee, Bill McPeak. I mean, some of these guys I don't even know much about. Dale Dodrill, Myron Podius, Jerry Shipke, Jack Butler, Bill Dudley, Howard Hartley, Clendon Thomas, and then specialist place kicker Armand Nikolai and punter Pat Brady. Wow. And he's wanting us to, man, we ain't gonna be able to. I'm not gonna be able to do this exercise. My question is, if it were up to you, and you could expand this team to the '60s standard 40 players by adding 8 offensive and 8 defensive depth players, which players would you add? So he's saying from the Steelers legend team that was announced in 2007, what 8 players would you add?
On each side of the ball, he wants the roster to go to 40 total. So adding 8 offense, 8 defense. That's a great question. I listen, you're barking up the right tree on some old Steelers history. I love because not everyone thinks the Steelers were created in 1970 or the Immaculate Reception was like the first play, but there's so much history that gets forgotten about because the team was really bad for those first, 40 years before Chuck Noll arrived. So it's an awesome question. I love the history. I'm right there with you. I would have to really sit down and map it out because most of the names on the list are the guys that I think about. Big Daddy Lipscomb and, of course, Stautner, first player to have his number retired, and Bobby Lane, great quarterback of his day, could throw with the best of them, could drink with the best of them. John Henry Johnson, first 1,000-yard rusher. Roy Jefferson, I just wrote about him recently, kind of comparable to George Pickens. Jack Butler, Hall of Famer, great Blesto. Had a Blesto for a long time. I mean, I'd have to really kind of comb through some other names. Whizzer White in his short time with Pittsburgh, you could potentially expand him and put him on the list. I mean, I'd really have to sit down and think about names beyond that. A lot of the names I was thinking of do appear on this list because the Steelers of those days, there weren't a ton of stars and they came and went. And so most of those names are represented on this list. So it's an awesome question, but maybe that's something I'll write for an article or something, but I probably don't have a great answer for you right now.
I don't either. He's talking pre-1970 era, right? Even though this group was chosen in 2007 as part of the Steelers' 75th season celebration in 2007. I obviously know several of these guys on the list: Bobby Lane, Dick Hope, John Henry Johnson, Roy Jefferson, Ray Matthews, L.B. Nickel, Frank Barachone, Ernie Stautner. Who else on this list? Jack Butler, Bill Dudley. Trying to think of guys that I think that's the list of guys that really jump out to me that I know a lot about.
I would put on here Lynn Chatnoy. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. He was a really good runner, an elite returner in his day. There was a story about against the Giants. He returned the opening kickoff. It got called back for holding. They kicked again. He ran back to the next one. He was an electric returner and playmaker. I think it was an issue with the coach. Was that Buddy Parker back then that ended up cutting him? But that's another name that would come to mind that I would put on that list.
Yeah, you got to remember, I was born in 1968. So, and I obviously became a fan during the, Still Curtain era, early 70s and all like that. So, yeah, my knowledge is still very, I've got some knowledge of the guys that I just rattled off there, but to go back and add 8 on each side of the ball, it would take me some research to be able to come up with a good list of that.
I'm being offensive focused, but I'll give you one more, and maybe I wouldn't actually put him on the list if I sat down and wrote out all the names, but one of my favorite names from that pre-merger era is Paul Moss, who played on the original inaugural team in 1933 just for that season. The Steeler who caught the first offensive touchdown or scored the first offensive touchdown in team history. The first points were a safety. The first touchdown was a 99-yard pick six the other way, not by Paul Moss, but Moss had a touchdown that came in Pittsburgh's first over win against the Chicago Cardinals. He was truly one of the best athletes of his day. I believe it was the late, great Grantland Rice had some really good things to say about him, but he was a fantastic athlete. as a football player. He's an end, a receiver. He was a minor league baseball player. Was a great golfer and bowler. I wrote an article on him several years ago. There's a really interesting story on Paul Moss. So just another name that's coming to mind, jogging my memory of these pre-merger Steelers.
I tell you, the better question that we have in reply to Elijah Fisher here is what autographs do you have of that Legends team? I'd like to know that.
That's a good one. Yeah, I don't think I have any autographs. I have a Big Daddy football card. It's not signed, but I do have that. I'm not as big of a card collector as I once was, but I do have a Big Daddy, which is one of my favorite players and stories of all time. He was a guy that was, gone too soon, but for that short stint when he played with Ernie Stautner, man, that was a heck of a D-line duo.
Elijah, send us a follow-up email. Let us know the autographs that you have from that Legends team.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about it for sure. So great question. We appreciate the enthusiasm. I love anybody that honors the history of this team because, like I said, so many people don't talk about the pre-merger Steelers. It's that whole decades and decades is basically lost to history. But I've written play-by-plays on the entire 1933 and 1934 seasons. That was a long time ago on the site. And so, yeah, I know David O is also a big Steelers historian as well, and he's done a lot of great content on the head coaches and notable players. He's got his all-time top 500 Steelers list, and a lot of those names do appear on that list. So, yeah, it's a really cool piece of history that does not get talked about enough.
Maybe David O can do an article on that. Maybe I'll forward this email to David O. Maybe David O can use it as a basis of to wrap an article around.
There you go. I love it.
All right, that's let's see, we got about an hour, 10 minutes in here. So Alex and I'll be back Wednesday at the normal time, I think, and we'll get back after it again. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button, donate button as well. And let's see, make sure you look on the Twitter feeds tomorrow night of all of us. Couple of the guys will be at the Pirates game, probably going to be posting a couple of pictures from there as well too. So until Wednesday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.